First of all, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first of a series of informational seminars sponsored by the Grounds Committee, known as Coffee Grounds. Hence the poster, devoted to a number of landscaping topics, which hopefully you'll find of interest. And we're dealing with 4 today. But before I begin, I would like to introduce the members of the Grounds Committee. Betty Ann Davis, Mr. Coffee, Eric Clark, Kristen Paulson, and Kathy Whalen. And also I'd like to acknowledge Lee Gouny, our town manager, Mark Putoff, and I see 2 board members, Ms. Rafferty and Gay Silberg. Thank you for coming. Let me begin by just giving an overview of what the Grounds Committee has been up to of late before I get into the program overall. First of all, I hope you've all noticed our annual plantings went in about a month ago, and they're really in full bloom, and we're very happy with the appearance and the design, which we received input from our landscaping company, who really treated the soil this go-around, which really has impacted the appearance and the vitality of the plants. We are also in the process of, or we have renovated certain areas in front of the real estate office. I hope you've taken notice of that area. The corner in front of the post office and the water fountain area. That is a total redesign, and it's devoted to Florida friendly and more contemporary to give the community an uplift. That said, we have more projects in the works for 2019 that would involve re-landscaping the gatehouse front and rear, re-landscaping the entrance sign to the community, re-landscaping the sign, the community sign on Vanderbilt in Logan, as well as the behind the town center and in front of the town center. There are projects which we have approved funding for next year. We've started the planning process, but we want to make sure it's done right. And again, we have received good input from our landscaper in terms of what plants will work and won't work. We're also in the process of assisting facilities in improving the landscaping in the pool area. And the first step was to remove all of the dead or dying plants. And it's unbelievable the amount of dead and dying plants that were over there, because I don't go to the pool area very rarely, and I couldn't believe the condition that they were in. So they removed all of the dead plants and they put mulch in for now. And the facilities is going to extend the pavers to the fence facing the lake so that they can put in cabanas and have more room for seating, which is really going to look great. And I believe their furniture is coming in sometime later this month. We've also finalized plans to revitalize the landscaping in the tennis court area. Very, very worn looking, long overdue. And I think that's going to look really great when it's finished. So there are the projects that we have in the pipeline for next year. So let me start with the program. It consists of really 4 parts. The first one is a lead off by Lee Gouny to talk about mulch. So Lee, if you could come up, I'd appreciate it. Yeah.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Good
morning. How are you?
You brought the bags?
I brought the bag, so if anybody wants to smell them, you can see. According to Lori, there is a difference. They're going to be sourcing these. When I first got here, and I'm going to say this, I still am shocked to believe that it still hasn't been 3 months yet that I've been here. But doesn't it feel like I've been here forever?
How about for you?
So there's a lot of people who are really happy, and there's a lot of people who are really annoyed that I'm here, but I'm just going to keep chugging along. So I want to thank you all. First of all, I want to thank you all for allowing me to be a part of this process. I do want to tell you what a great landscaping, it's not just landscaping, all your committees, but the landscaping committee is so dedicated to doing it right. When I came on board, I was so thrilled to see that there were people who actually understood and got the concept that we need to do the things differently going forward. We can't do the same old, we can't keep planting the same plants, we can't keep moving in the same direction. They grabbed it, they're learning about it, they're bringing in really informative groups or going to meetings to understand the concept about how important your landscaping is, Florida friendly, losing the water, trying to have less pesticides or pest control and herbicides. They understand it, and you are truly blessed to have them. So every time you see them walking around the community, please give them a hug for me, because they deserve it, truly. So when I started here, there was a conversation from several residents that they were rather dissatisfied. Mulch was supposed to be installed. The board promised. We paid for 2. So I sat with the board, sat with the treasurer, tried to find out exactly what happened. Well, as you know, due to the issue with the landscaper, trying to give them the opportunity to get things where it needed to be, due to your restoration project where they were ripping out a tremendous amount of common area landscaping, also the irrigation replacement where they had to come through and remove some sod and shrubbery, there was so much upheaval in the community that to actually try to mulch not knowing what was going to be ripped out would have been counterproductive. It would have been a waste of funds and money, and owners would have been very dissatisfied, especially since you just put mulch in, now you're ripping it out. So what the board wisely decided to do was to allow us to do the second application of 2018 the first month of 2019. So in the middle of January, they're going to start the application, but this would have been the second mulching that was in your budget for 2018. We are using the funds that are allocated in 2018. And the budget that they have created for 2019 will give you a second application at the end of November, and that will bring you up to where you need to be with your applications of mulch. I had the contractor come in. The contract was already approved from the beginning for the whole year, so this is the same contractor that you have actually been using for quite a few years. It's Southeast Spreading. Sorry, they worked for your other landscapers, so they were a subcontractor, and they came in and laid the mulch. We had a great tutorial, and Mark and I were sitting there, and I learned so much about mulch. I feel like I could go out and sell the mulch now. But I can guarantee you the mulch that they install is not the mulch that an owner could go to Home Depot or Lowe's and purchase. It's a totally different type of mulch, and it is designed to protect your landscaping. So where you get the mulch at Home Depot, Lowe's, or any of your local nurseries, it's a larger chip, it's a larger bark, and it looks nice and fluffy, and the appearance when you first put it on looks great. What happens with that particular type of mulch is it actually starts to compact and become a mat. So if you've ever put down the mulch and like 6 months later, you can actually lift it up. It almost comes off like shingles off a roof. It's not deteriorating, it's not breaking down, it is not protecting your plant material, it's just there. It loses its color and it is not effective anymore. It actually becomes destructive to your landscaping because it starts to mold and mildew underneath, and it will actually ruin your plants. So the plant material that they use, this is all locally sourced in Florida. It is not purchased from out of the country. You don't have to worry about termites. You don't have to worry about any pests being brought in. These are 2 growers, and these are the only 2 growers that they use. One is called USA Mulch, and the other is called Forestry Resources. So they work hand in hand with these 2 companies that grow their own material and shred them and grind them up. I also found out, this was new to me, all mulch is dyed. There is no mulch. The gold mulch, everything comes with the color edge. I thought this was maybe the actual color. No, everything is actually dyed. Your red, your golden, your black, and your cocoa brown. The reason why this mulch is better for your property, it's a much finer grade. I know some people made the comment, I'm sorry, that it looked like dirt. Well, it is dark, it is cocoa brown, and it is very fine. And there are some very fine particles mixed in with some medium coarse pieces. You have to have some bulk to it so it doesn't lay flat and wash away. Having the 2 types of the grind allows it to lay properly in your beds, not be washed off or blown off in severe storms. it allows it to break down and decompose properly. The decomposing is what gives the nutrients back to your plant material. If any of you have looked at your yards, you can see that the soil is totally compacted. It's almost impossible to get any kind of lift to it to plant even seasonal flowers. Generally, what my husband and I do is we bring in bags of topsoil manure, we do our own mix and lay it on top of our soil to give something to put the plants in, because it compacts so quickly. Our soil base here is gravel and sand. It's not a really great environment for the plants, especially if you're up north. It doesn't look anything what we're used to. In fact, I made a joke the other day. Anybody that moves to Florida, before you cross that line, you have to sign a form saying, I understand that everything in Florida is different. That it's just totally different. So the company is a great company. They are very determined to make sure that everything is done right. It's going to be a 1.5 to 2 inch top. The tree plantings around the street curbs gets a little bit less. It's more for cosmetic, because the trees with their roots, they don't need to have the same protection that your plant beds do. So don't be concerned when you see a smaller layer along the tree circles. That's the way it has to be. Your homes will have a little higher mulching. I believe the community has a set area that they mulch for your homes. We are having maps prepared by the vendor to show each home model. They're going to highlight the area that the association mulches, and then they're highlighting the area that the owners are responsible for, because the association only mulches the front and back to a certain proportion to the back of your home. Depending on the home and the door and the setback, I believe it's different for each model. They are also going to have a staffer here starting next week. We've assigned 5 days. There'll be a couple mornings, there'll be a couple afternoons, and 1 Saturday that owners can come in here and show them what model they're doing, fill out a form to order mulch to do the back of your yards. The mulch will be at the same cost that the association is paying for, so it's going to be at a tremendous savings to the owners that are mulching. It is imperative, and please let your neighbors know, spread this out, it's imperative that you mulch your backs. You can see if you walk along the lake, there are owners who have gone and done so themselves. They didn't wait, they didn't want to wait. Those homes have fewer weeds, the plant material looks much healthier, the grounds look beautiful versus the homes where the owners have not taken any interest whatsoever. It's weedy, the plant material is sparse, it's just not a pleasant appearance, and we're trying to increase the pleasant appearance in the community. We want it to look beautiful, we want it to look finished. Mulching the backs of your yard will finish off your property and give that walking path the look it should have, something that's luxurious, beautiful, and it will help your plant material. So help us, help your plants, help the landscaper. This will also help keep the weeds down, so you're not worrying about the weeds. We're producing less weeding, less chemicals to control the weeds, which is going to be great, especially in the backs, because this leaches right into the lakes. And if you ever want to hear about the problems we're having with the lakes, please come sit at a Lakes Committee meeting and you'll hear the issues that they're fighting because of this. So it's a great product, it's a great company. Mark and I are going to be overseeing most of the process to make sure that it's done right. We work closely with all of our vendors. We have them working with the landscaper to make sure that the new areas that they're planting are going to be mulched. It's going to be beautiful when we're done, and I hope that I've given you some good information on the mulch.
Well, if we purchase the mulch for the back, will they spread it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yep. They're doing the pre-orders now. I guess last year it was a little hectic. There will be a hard cutoff date. So once that date passes, you're on your own. So this is a good price, a good deal. They'll come in and do it. It'll all be done at one time. Yes, sir.
If you purchase additional mulch, can you have the option of installing it yourself at a discounted rate?
I don't know. You'd have to ask them that.
Ask who?
The mulcher. Because they're giving it to you at such a bargain that's usually, but I don't know if they will or not.
You know what the price is per bag?
I don't know the actual price right now. I think it's $3 and change per bag.
Oh, that's
Okay. So
That's
it's,
reasonable.
and that's the cost of labor to install too.
Can we order,
excellent.
can we order this online, the additional mulch, or you have to, a form by the window? Where do we do
Well,
that?
what the lady, they're actually bringing their employee, in order to not overwhelm Lori and our staff, they're bringing in their only staff member. We're gonna have them sitting in I think you call that the living room. She'll be there, she'll have the forms, you can pay by a check or credit card. So yes, it will have to be done that way. I believe They will also take orders via the phone with the office, but they prefer to have it done this way because it's 1,856 homes. It's much easier to process it.
And when will they be available?
There's gonna be 5 days. We're gonna send out an email
Oh, okay.
with the models to show you what's being mapped, with the form to order so you can pre-fill it out before you come up, and the instructions of how they're gonna do it and when they're gonna do it. So that'll be sent out by the end of this week,
When does that sign up begin?
next week.
I'm not gonna be here next week, so how do I sign up?
I will have them make arrangements for whoever's not here. They will have a way for you to order the extra mulch and have it taken care of even though you're not here. You'll be able to talk to them, email them, or phone them, and then pay with a credit card over the phone.
Okay.
Is Landscape Elements of Design by Kathy Whalen. Kathy?
Hello, how are you? A lot of you showed up, which is really nice. We're happy to see you. Your neighbor. Nice to see you. I'm going to talk about elements and principles of design because what we're talking about here really is Florida friendly, and our friend Betty Ann is going to talk about that in a moment. It's all related. And if we're dealing with plants, we're going to need to know a little bit about these things. And it's as if you're involved with, let's say, chemistry. What do you have to know? You have to know your, what? Your element.
Basics.
What do they call that? The periodic tables, right? Isn't that fundamental to chemistry? And then if you're involved with, let's say, math, what do you need to know? Your times tables, right? If you're going to be involved in design, you need to know elements and principles of design. If you are Michelangelo and you're dealing with art, or architecture, if you're Beethoven and you're dealing with music, if you're Paloma Picasso and you're doing jewelry design, even Picasso himself, even the Beatles, all of those programs, everything that's an art is put together deliberately or unconsciously based on the elements and principles of design. And the thing is, when you understand the elements and principles of design, your likelihood of having success and repeating success is greater because you know what you're doing. So with Florida Friendly, the focus really is on water protection, water purity. And so we want to do things that comply with and work with Florida Friendly, and to keep our water in IslandWalk cleaner, to keep our water in Naples cleaner, in the state, throughout the country, and really throughout the world. Water is an enormous, enormous issue that's coming to a head. So we want to be responsible partners. So elements and principles of design, it's like baking a cake. You have ingredients and you have a recipe, and you should also have a handout. And if you don't, feel free to take one because you may be able to see the pictures better from the handout. It's on the table over there. And so it's like baking a cake. You need ingredients and you need a recipe. And the ingredients are line, and I'm going to use the pictures to point it out to you. You see in this design, the sidewalk really creates the line in the garden. And feel free to move around and come up and do whatever, pull your chairs up or whatever. It creates the line, and you'll see in the picture that the plants follow that line. And so it's moving the eye. It's creating a unit that's whole and that's unified and creating harmony. And then by using various forms, round forms, triangular forms of plants, maybe you're using the pavers or stones, which are more of a flat surface. So your forms are conical, they're round, they're in some cases, they're more rectangular. There are all kinds of forms that you can come up with by putting a number of plants together, which is really desirable. When you put a number of plants together, it's called grouping. And you have greater impact when you group. If you have single plants, your eye has to stop here, it has to stop there, it has to stop there. And when you do something that's repeated, either in form or color or the exact same plant, your eye travels and it becomes a very pleasing entity to look at. So we talked a little bit about form. Space is important because what space does, it gives the eye a place to rest so that you're not frenzied and just, here, there, where should I look? You just have no idea. And so incorporating space, which is actually done by the walkway, which is done in this second picture on page 2. You'll see between the plants there is mulch, and in the front there are actually stones, and so the plants are put here and there, and there's space in between, and that's really good. It gives them a healthy opportunity to grow well and not be so close together that they get infected by one another. So there's a lot of good advantages to having space, plus the fact that it's good for the eye, it makes it restful and peaceful, good for the pocketbook too. Texture, we have some. We have some more. And we can talk about color as well. Thank you. So we'll talk about texture and color at the same time. So we have a spiky texture. And we have another. This is a grass, but it's really a spiky kind of texture, isn't it? And we have another one, spiky. If you put all these together, just one at a time, it doesn't look very pretty, does it? No, it's kind of boring. So that by repeating, it's really a lot prettier. You don't have to have 47 of them, even just 3, 5, 7, whatever number works for you, depending upon how large the area is that you want to work in. I'm just going to put these on the table. Another spiky one, we've seen a lot of this, the flax lily. But again, putting them all together in that same form all together is not so interesting. It's a little more boring. And so to put it together with something like, let's say, I'm not suggesting planting these together. These are just for the sake of conversation. But you see how one makes the other look better. You get to look at this one and you get to look at the other one, whereas you put all these things that are so similar together and you really don't know what you're seeing. So this is very shiny. This is an example of something that is very matte, buttonwood. And it's gray and it's actually pubescent, it's furry. And putting them together because of different sizes, it looks more interesting than if I were to use, for example, this is Ixora, the traditional size, and when you put it with this, does it look very interesting? No, it looks all the same, doesn't it? So that's why you want to be conscious when you're going to do contrast, very important, you'll see it over here, you want to make it a big contrast in general, so that you can tell the difference. The greater the contrast, the greater the difference, but you have to have things unified, and that could be through color, or because you've done repetition to join them together. For example, even though these plants down here are separated, there are 3, hard to tell whether they're boxwoods or exactly what they are, and they're round forms. But because there are 3 and they're in a pattern, you can tell that they're leading the eye through the garden. So that's a form of grouping. Even though there's space in between, they are grouped. So be conscious of texture, of size, be conscious of texture. Again, putting, well, this will work. Let's see something that doesn't work so well. This little one. Where are you? Oh, this one. Putting fine, small leaves next to more small leaves. I have one. Next to boxwood. It's just not enough difference to look very interesting, is there? No. You really want to have, well, yes, you can tell the difference now, can't you? And this has great color. Thank you. Great color. So that you can create contrast in many ways. I think you get the point. An upright form, we were talking about form before. Tall shape as opposed to round. So we talked a little bit about texture, we talked about color, and color is very fun to play with. Look at how pretty these are together. They all have a little bit of the blue in them, don't they? They're related by blue in here and blue in here. And you have to think about that. Some people do. But it really is a palette that works beautifully together. And then you could put even orange with it. The best thing to do is look at the color wheel. So we talked about color, we talked about size, big leaves, small leaves, tall plants, small plants, we need it all. And we need pattern. And pattern in this case is made particularly through the pathway, it's very obvious. Pattern is also made by the repetition of one plant after the other. And so creating patterns carries the eye. Sometimes fragrance comes into play. Some people may have gardenia plants. And at light, if you're using night lighting on your plants, it really is a beautiful effect. This is not referring to sunlight and shade here. So we have the ingredients. It's like baking. You're going to make chocolate chip cookies, let's say. So here are your chocolate chips and your flour and your eggs and all those things. Now what are you going to do? You're going to put them together. So you're going to put the butter in first. You're going to mix it up, and it's time to hurry up. Okay, balance. You're going to look on your paper. You don't want, it's like we're arranging furniture. You don't want all the furniture on one side of your room because it feels like it's falling off and like it's empty over there, like the room is lopsided. Proportion, you want it to be in scale and in proportion with the house. We're getting to the point where we have more garden than we have a house right now, in many instances. And we have very small front lines, so we have to be very careful of that. Dominance, and something needs to be very important in order to make the other things look restful and to carry the eye. So you need important and you need less important or subordinate. We talked about contrast, rhythm, we talked about that and how the eye is carried. Depth is front to back. You want something short, you want something tall, you want something lower, so that the eye looks through the garden front to back or along the diagonal. Repeating, repetition, we talked about that, and that will give you unity and harmony. And thank you. To Betty Ann.
A little bit about Florida Friendly. What is it and why is it important? Who cares about Florida Friendly? Florida Friendly is really a concept. It's principles, it's a package. It is a set of guidelines for homeowners in terms of how they do their landscaping. It's a set of guidelines and requirements for builders and developers, how they develop their properties, and it's a set of guidelines and requirements and certification for professional landscapers, okay? It is, the total package was put together, it is actually a Florida statute. It was developed in 2008. 2008, well, think about when IslandWalk was put together, way prior to that. So the new developments are constructed in a Florida-friendly environment. IslandWalk, as beautiful as it was not constructed with Florida-friendly in mind. So what we have to do is evolve toward a Florida-friendly environment here in IslandWalk. Now, we all want our properties to be beautiful. We want the landscaping to be functional, but we need it to be sustainable. And Kathy mentioned water, how important water is, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Florida Friendly has 9 overriding principles. The first one is right plant, right place. Second one is water efficiency. Third one is fertilize appropriately. Those are the 3 that I can rip off at the top of my head. The others, okay, we're going to talk a little bit about mulch. Lee mentioned it. Attracting wildlife. Oh, that's interesting. Managing your yard pests responsibly. Recycling yard waste. Reduce stormwater runoff. And protecting the waterfront. So you might have got the idea that I'm going to bring in a little bit of lakes information here too. Okay, So let's talk about the first one. Right plant, right place. Kathy just talked about how we design the landscaping. But right plant, right place. Sun, shade. Well, what's different in Florida? Water. Oh, we get a lot of water in the summertime. Drought. It's very dry in the wintertime here. So we have to accommodate those things. Also the size of the plant and how close plants go together. If you think about when you purchase a plant at the nursery, one of the things that most people don't pay too much attention to, and it's critical here in Florida because it's very different, is how big is that plant gonna get? It comes in a gallon container, even if you buy a 3-gallon container. If you read the label, so many of our plants here can get to 10, 15 feet high, 10 feet wide, but the bush is only this big when you get it. And not only wide, but 10 feet this way too. You guys are not the only ones with that talent. Thanks, Al. That's right. So how big your plants are is really, really important. And spacing between the plants. Lee talked about that. Kathy talked about it. I'm going to talk about it in principle number 2, because principle number 2 is water efficiency. Why do we care about water efficiency? Well, we want our plants to be healthy, but if you think about where we are today with water, we have a lot of water available, but did you know that some of our plants really don't live unless we irrigate all year long? Okay, that sounds basic, okay? But here in Florida, we get 80% of our rain in the summer, and the rest of it during this dry season that we're in now. But we have irrigation, so why do we care? Well, even our lakes, the water that we use to irrigate, it's restricted by the county. And most people think we have abundant water because we have our own lakes, our own detention ponds. Different areas are currently restricted. Tampa homeowners can only water once a week. You may have heard the Cape is down to twice a week. We're able to water 3 times a week here, and it's wonderful. But the day's gonna come when we have more and more droughts, and we are restricted with how much we can water. So Florida Friendly is designed to position us not so much for our where we are today with water, but where we're probably going to be in the future. You know that out to the east and the north, there's a lot of development going on. All of that development is going to cause further water impact, and I believe that impact is going to ultimately be water restriction. So as we change our environment here in IslandWalk, we're going to change some of our plantings, change some of our plant designs and landscaping. We want to do it with water efficiency in mind. We don't want to end up with more of the same that we can't sustain if we're restricted. So that's why it's important to us. It's really critical that we move forward with new plants and new designs that enable us to survive the inevitable, that water restriction and water limitation that's coming. Native plants will help us in this, as well as the design, the spacing, the layout, the kinds of plants that we use. The third item is fertilize appropriately. Now our turf is fertilized by our landscapers. We should, as homeowners, should not be fertilizing our turf. If you fertilize the grass, you're giving it a double dose. Where does all of that fertilizer that doesn't seep into the grass end up? The runoff ends up in our lakes, promoting algae blooms, promoting an unhealthy environment in our lakes. So please don't fertilize your turf on your own. The fourth principle is mulch. Lee talked about mulch, keeps our plants moist, improves the appearance, keeps the weeds down. We want to make sure that we mulch, not only where the landscapers put the mulch. Lee talked about mulching the back of your property. Very important. The fifth principle is attracting wildlife. Ooh, wildlife. Well, we all know we're not supposed to have fruit trees and things that attract wildlife. Well, the fruit trees attract unwanted wildlife here. We don't want the wildlife that's going to chew into your screen cages or get into your roof, those kinds of things. But there's a lot of Florida-friendly plantings that will attract bees, birds, butterflies, and provide shelter for some of the positive wildlife that we have around, the little bunnies that we all enjoy see, popping around. So attracting wildlife. The sixth principle is manage your yard pests responsibly. Do not go out and nuke everything in your yard the minute you see a bug. We have a lot of bugs, insects, that are very, very positive here in Florida. We have literally hundreds of kinds of ladybugs, just as an example. But those bugs don't all look the same as they evolve and grow into ladybugs. So if you have pest problems, either go online, talk to the landscapers here, but don't just nuke every bug that you see, because a lot of them are really, really important for us. Number 7, recycle your yard waste. So easy here in IslandWalk. Depending on where you live, Monday and Tuesday, Duval picks up all of the yard waste that we have. The county also does a pickup for us periodically. Just recycle it. It's part of the Florida-friendly principles. Ultimately, it goes to the landfills where it's supposed to, it's managed, etc. So just don't trash it. We want to recycle the yard waste. Number 8, reduce stormwater runoff. Well, let's think about that. The ideal situation is for the rain and the stormwater runoff from our roofs that comes out of our drains to be spread across the turf, the grass. It should then soak into the ground. And ultimately, what does that do? It replenishes the aquifers. The aquifers are critical and will continue to be more and more critical as we have more and more development here in Southwest Florida. So the ideal situation is to allow the runoff to penetrate into the ground and into those aquifers. If your runoff goes onto the pavement, onto your driveway and onto your walkways and straight out into the street and down into the sewers, ultimately that goes to the lakes, which isn't bad, but it's really more positive if you can get that water into the aquifers. So that's what we're encouraging folks to do. And there's lots of reasons why it's not always the easiest things for people to do, but that's ideally where you want the stormwater runoff to go. And last but not least is protecting the waterfront. You are well aware that we've had a program with the Lakes Committee to put littorals out on our waterfront. We've got a lot of plants out there. The littorals have multiple purposes. The roots protect and grab and hold on to the lake bank so we minimize the erosion. They also soak up that flow of nutrients from fertilizers. So those littorals out there just gobble up that last little bit of flow that comes into those plants. And they will protect that excess from flowing into the lakes. And last but not least, that waterfront is really a great opportunity for our fish to spawn. And when you have a few little fish out there, you get a lot of wildlife. And I don't know if you've been looking at the lakes, we've had an abundance this year of birds, ducks. I mean, we've got storks back this year. It's just been a gorgeous, gorgeous picture out on those lakes. Now, those are the principles for Florida Friendly. In February, we're going to have an in-depth presentation from the county. And the county will be here to really work with us in IslandWalk and help us migrate to a more Florida-friendly environment. They're going to teach us more. We're all learning, okay? It's new to me. It's new to most of us. But the presentation and the certification that we hope to get from the county will commence in February. And so I encourage you, it'll be advertised, we'll talk a lot about it, but I encourage you to come back and participate in that presentation, which will be far more in-depth and go into these principles and move us toward Florida friendly. Up here are some pictures. They demonstrate some of the things that we've talked about, spacing between the plants. You've got some things down here, not the tons of things really tightly packed that we're accustomed to here. Some plants that are a little bit more drought tolerant, okay? So those are examples of things that we have, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.